Hello. Today, we're recapping the Mechanic movie series. The film begins in Colombia with a plane touching down in a secluded hangar. A man named Jorge is being transported when they encounter a roadblock. His crew resolves the situation and they proceed to his big mansion. Jorge is having a swim when he notices one of his watches at the bottom of the pool and dives to retrieve it, but is intercepted by a man wearing a breathing apparatus. The man submerges Jorge until he stops moving. His bodyguard sees Jorge's lifeless body, but since it looked like he was swimming, he ignores it, not knowing it was fake. The assassin lets go of him and makes his escape, and this is where we meet Arthur Bishop. The lifeless body is discovered, prompting all the armed guards to rush into the residence. Arthur, dressed as a chef, navigates through the house and changes into a different outfit outdoors. Jorge's associates gather around him, confused. In the meantime, Arthur makes his way to a bridge, leaps into the waters beneath, and takes a boat to escape. After some time, in New Orleans, Louisiana, Arthur gets out of the truck and onto the pier. He boards a boat and navigates through the water until nightfall and gets home. Inside, he unveils a wall filled with images of his targets. At times, he stages it to look like an accident, while other times he frames someone else. He then departs from his home, boards his boat, sails to a dock, and encounters a friend named Henry, to whom he hands over money. He gets into his car and heads to a local cafe where he meets with Harry McKenna. It appears Harry brought two of his bodyguards along, and Arthur informs him that the task has been accomplished, and Harry is happy with that. Arthur discovers his next target is Harry. To his surprise, he arranges a meeting, flown to a neutral site where he meets Dean. Dean reveals a failed operation in Africa, known only to him and Harry, resulting in the death of 5 men. Harry's betrayal is evident in a 20 million transfer to an offshore account. Arthur is given 48 hours to finish the task, or it will be reassigned. The next day, Harry logs onto his computer, as does Arthur, who delves into the investigation of the botched operation. Arthur acknowledges the truth in Dean's words and contemplates his next move. Without a moment's delay, he contacts Harry, warning him to evacuate the building as they are on their way. He instructs Harry to disable the building's power and make his way to the elevator lobby. With impeccable precision, Arthur guides Harry to the building's basement. Harry navigates some stairs and emerges into a parking lot where he finds his van in ruins, and Arthur stepping into view. Harry knows Arthur is here because of the botched operation in Africa. In an attempt to aid Arthur in staging a murder as though it were a car theft, Harry takes a gun and fires at his own car. Arthur questions why Harry didn't simply end his life, but Harry expresses his preference for Arthur over anyone else. Consequently, Arthur puts a bullet in his chest, but the act of ending the life of a close friend engulfs him in a wave of profound regret. At Harry's funeral, his son Steve says hello to Arthur and then leaves. He returns to ask Arthur for a lift, and Arthur says yes. During the ride, Steve learns that Harry really loved him, even though they didn't talk much. Arthur is asked to come into Harry's house, which the bank is about to take. Steve mentions that his dad's money is all gone, and he won't use any money from his dad's death. As Arthur is about to leave, Steve asks who would shoot a person in a wheelchair. Arthur is so upset that he just walks away. Later, Steve wrecks the house, and later is parked in an area where a man offers him help. Steve declines, and the man points a gun at him, wanting the car. He parked here to find the car thieves who killed his dad. He beats the man badly and is about to kill him when Arthur appears out of nowhere and stops him. He lets the beaten man go and puts Steve in the car. The next day, Arthur goes shopping. Steve spots him and stops. He asks Arthur if he can make him a hitman. Arthur says no and goes back to the dock to look at a boat he's thinking of buying. At night, Arthur looks at a photo of his good friend and calls Steve. He picks up and Arthur gives him a place and time to meet. When the time comes, Arthur tells Steve that he's a mechanic, a hitman who fixes people's problems. He also says his job is hard, and they adopt a dog. Arthur adds that being a mechanic needs a certain way of thinking. Revenge doesn't exist. The next day, Arthur tells Steve to take the dog to a coffee shop, order a black coffee, sit by the window, and do Sudoku puzzles every day for 3 weeks. Arthur also takes him to a shooting range, preparing him for any fights he might face in the future. Arthur gives him a book about insurance that covers almost all ways a person can die, and asks him to read it. After losing his home and car, Steve moves in with Arthur and hones his shooting skills. Arthur takes him to a shady place where they meet a gun dealer. Arthur kills the dealer to show Steve the harsh reality. Back home, Arthur reveals the dealer's illicit activities and introduces their next target, Burke, a rival group's hitman with a fondness famous for chihuahuas. Arthur's plan unfolds smoothly, and Steve invited for a drink and armed with poison. On that particular evening, Steve seizes the moment, retrieves the poison, but returns it to his pocket. He expresses his gratitude to Burke and departs, only to be pursued by Burke, who offers him a lift. Despite Arthur's protests, Steve is transported back to a fancy house. Burke gives him a tour, and Steve, acting foolishly, attempts to assassinate Burke in the same manner Arthur had dealt with the arms dealer. The plan fails, leading to a furious brawl between the two. Steve is thrown about and beaten severely. Despite the odds, he manages to get a hold of a screwdriver and repeatedly stabs Burke until he ceases to move. Upon returning to Arthur's place, Arthur is displeased with the violence caused by Steve, but remains unfazed. The following day, Arthur retrieves a package from the airport and heads back to his vehicle. Inside the package, he finds cash and a phone. He dials the number provided and converses with Dean, who informs him that an outsider was employed to fulfill his task. Although displeased, Dean emphasizes that the upcoming assignment is of utmost importance and requires immediate attention. Back at Arthur's residence, he posts the new target, and Steve assists him in organizing the documents. Their mark is a man who has amassed a fortune through his churches and fraudulent schemes, leading Steve to conclude that he's essentially leading a cult. The pair then devise a strategy to assassinate him using adrenaline. In the city of Chicago, Steve informs Arthur about a woman who departed a Bible study group with him and was later discovered deceased. Their target checks into a hotel as the pair prepare for combat. They initiate their ascent of the building from the exterior, with Arthur installing cameras throughout. They observe their target indulging in a meal before retiring to bed. The pair resume their climb, reaching the rooftop and subsequently entering the hotel. The space is rather confined, and they dispatch a camera through the ventilation system, confirming the room is unoccupied. Their target returns, and the pair, having audio surveillance within the room, listen to the man's complaints. A doctor enters the room, and their target permits him to administer a potent substance, which unfortunately neutralizes their adrenaline, necessitating a change in plans. As the doctor left, they swiftly enter the room while his guards remain outside. They improvise, eliminate their target, and make a hasty exit just as the doctor re-enters the room and discovers his patient lifeless. He summons the other men, who quickly conceal the evidence as Steve inadvertently dislodges a bolt that falls through the vents. The men investigate the noise, and during this time, Steve eliminates one of them, and they flee under gunfire. The men pursue the pair, and Arthur swiftly neutralizes several goons as he dashes through the building. Steve dispatches 3 attackers in quick succession, and Arthur does likewise, albeit unarmed. He relies on hand-to-hand combat to accomplish the task, and Steve joins him. The pair secure their lines and leap off the building amidst a hail of bullets. They halt and force entry into a room as law enforcement arrives on the scene. The pair separate to evade detection, and Dean receives news of the shooting. Arthur heads to the airport to return home, but he notices the same man who was believed to have died during the mission in Africa and promptly starts tailing him. He maintains a vigilant watch on the man who was thought to be deceased, sits beside him on a bus, and inquires about the events in Africa. It appears that Dean had compensated him handsomely to eliminate the other 4 members, and due to Harry's suspicions, they had dispatched Arthur to assassinate him. The hitman seizes a knife, and a conflict ensues. Engaging in combat within the confined space of a bus proves challenging, but Arthur succeeds in wounding the hitman. The fight persists, and Arthur hurls him out of the bus, where he is fatally struck by a passing car. Later on, he returns to the pier only to find Henry absent. Suddenly, a vehicle arrives and men with weapons scatter across the dock in search of Arthur. However, Arthur surfaces from the water, effortlessly eliminating 3 men. He then notices his friend lifeless in the water and promptly calls Dean to warn him. He boards his boat and contacts Steve, only to discover a gun pointed at him. He informs Steve of a concealed weapon in the sofa, which Steve swiftly retrieves and uses to neutralize the hitman encircling him. Upon Arthur's return, he instructs Steve to collect a few boxes for transport as he searches for Dean's bodyguard. However, Steve stumbles upon his father's firearm, but chooses to remain silent on it for now. On their way to Dean, Steve inquires if Arthur ever thinks about the people he has eliminated. Arthur responds that he hasn't, prompting Steve to probe further, hinting at the possibility of Arthur having killed his father. However, Arthur admits to having ended the lives of people he knew and expresses profound remorse afterwards. They proceed with their journey, arriving at the residence of one of Dean's security guards. They attack him, and his family is cornered. Arthur, devoid of any guilt, swiftly seizes the man's daughter and threatens to harm her. The man reacts too late, and as the slicing begins, he starts to talk. Interestingly, Arthur had merely tricked the man, using food as a decoy. Arthur then contacts Dean and learns that Harry's contract was valued at $50 million. Dean proposes a $10 million settlement for him to back off, but Arthur declines. Upon realizing that Arthur is inside the premises, Dean orders his men to get rid of him. The pair gear up for an intense firefight and position a camera at the building's entrance. Arthur then settles into a car, monitoring the camera as Steve commandeers a bus. As he begins to drive, Arthur spots Dean's car and accelerates to take out a nearby van. Dean's men emerge, guns firing, but Arthur retaliates. He leaps into a truck as Steve drives the bus into another one of Dean's vehicles. Arthur then approaches from the opposite side, kills the driver of Dean's car, and drags him onto the ground. They approach the barely conscious man and empty their guns into him. With the mission accomplished, Arthur suggests that they need to vanish, offering Steve the option to accompany him. As Steve reaches for water, Arthur spots Harry's gun. They drive for a while until they arrive at a station. Steve refuels while Arthur apologizes for all that has transpired. Steve then redirects the petrol towards the car and walks away. Arthur feels a pang of guilt as Steve pulls out his father's gun and fires. The car erupts in a massive explosion, seemingly killing Arthur. Steve returns to Arthur's place and settles on the couch. He approaches the music player and starts a song. He then heads outside to a car and gets in. He drives off just as the music player stops, triggering a bomb. Steve finds a note in the car declaring his death, and then boom. The car is launched into the air, and the house follows suit, transforming into a fireball. Back at the gas station, they review the footage and see Arthur escaping his car before the explosion. As it turns out, Arthur is alive and well. The second movie starts, and Arthur stirs awake and proceeds with his daily habits of activating his music player, savoring a cup of coffee, and pursuing the newspaper. He disembarks from the boat, arming a device as a precaution. His newfound lifestyle of leisure and sightseeing has even led him to take up biking. Subsequently, he enters a restaurant and is escorted to his regular dining area. However, he is swiftly confronted by a woman who claims to have tracked him down. Her employer wants him to eliminate 3 individuals, making each death appear accidental, or else she threatens to disrupt his peaceful existence. He promptly pulls out his phone, captures a photo, and strikes the woman. A brawl ensues with the other attackers, and he dispatches them. After neutralizing at least 6 men, he makes his escape by climbing a wall. They chase after him onto the lift, but he's not inside. He's at the top. The woman chases after him, but he jumps off the lift and lands on a paraglider to escape. At night, he comes back only to find someone on his boat. He quickly grabs his phone and triggers the bomb. Following this, he proceeds to a storage unit, prying open a hidden compartment in the floor to uncover a laptop. He brings up an image of a woman on the screen and heads towards his small cache of weapons and burns his passport. In the southern regions of Thailand, he navigates a boat to the coast. Here, he reunites with an old acquaintance named May. He briefs her about the circumstances, to which she informs him that the boss is absent and no one has approached his residence. He opens another hidden compartment in the floor, revealing more passports, firearms, and similar items. At night, he pays $10,000 to uncover a connection between the woman he encountered earlier and a man known as Raya Crane. The following morning, a woman named Gina inquires if May has a first aid kit she could borrow. May notices some bruises on Gina as she leaves. May takes a look at Gina's boat, sensing she's in danger, and promptly contacts Arthur. He initially dismisses her concerns, citing his own issues, but she convinces him. Without further delay, he embarks on his mission, disabling the boat's engine to remain unnoticed. When the man doesn't listen to his warnings, Arthur swiftly neutralizes him. He hands Gina over to May and proceeds to the lower deck. To his surprise, he discovers a handgun and a photograph of himself. He steers the boat to a remote location and douses it with petrol. From a safe distance, he fires a flare, setting the boat ablaze, thereby eliminating any trace of evidence. Without wasting a moment, he returns to Gina and questions her identity. She admits that Crane coerced her into approaching Arthur under the pretense of being in danger. Her task was to dial a specific number once he came to her rescue. The next morning, Gina notices Arthur strolling along the beach. beach. He dons his swimming gear and plunges into the water, soon learning that Gina operates a refuge for young children who have been subjected to horrific crimes. It appears that Crane had threatened her shelter and the children within. Arthur, however, spots a boat in the distance and observes it, realizing they are also watching him. He promptly steps outside and walks with Gina, giving Crane's associates the impression that their scheme is unfolding as planned. Together, they attend a local wedding. As darkness falls, Gina comes over to Arthur, expressing her gratitude for his help and apologizing for dragging him into her troubles. Her children are her world, and Arthur shares with her his own past. He was an orphan who was sold to a mobster and molded into a soldier. Crane was a part of that past too. As it turns out, Arthur managed to escape, but Crane didn't. Gina is filled with remorse for Arthur and embraces him in a hug. The following day, Crane's henchmen, in collaboration with the local police, storm the beach and abduct Gina. Arthur resists but is eventually subdued at gunpoint and handed a phone. He is taken to Bangkok and brought inside a mansion. As he takes a seat, a bomb is activated and Crane finally makes his appearance. Arthur doesn't waste any time and informs Crane that he's offering him a single opportunity to back off. Crane, amused, tosses him a dossier with 3 objectives. The first one is Krill, a notorious mass murderer and a significant arms trafficker. However, his current incarceration provides him protection from his adversaries. Crane then gives him an object to ingest, but only after the kill has been verified, so his crew can locate and retrieve him. In the meantime, Gina is escorted to a luxurious yacht, and Arthur proceeds with his usual pre-assassination routine. He scrutinizes everything from the wall heights to the sharks in the sea. He pursues through the wanted notices and spots one that resembles him. He collects a few essentials for the mission and returns to his flat. He duplicates the tattoos of the man on the wanted poster and fabricates a counterfeit passport. As he strolls through the city, he deliberately provokes the police, and upon recognizing him, they apprehend him. He is promptly incarcerated, and Crane's associates linger outside the penitentiary. The man conducting the search gives him the green light, and he enters the prison. Arthur then identifies Krill and his henchmen surrounding him. Another inmate mentions that Krill has murdered numerous individuals, and many prisoners desire his death, as he has taken their loved ones from them, but the guards around him make it unattainable. Arthur notices a man concealing a knife and swiftly takes it from him. Later, Arthur sees a man charging towards Krill with a knife. He hurls his own knife, saving the general. Krill swiftly rises, realizing that Arthur has saved his life, and expresses his gratitude by inviting him to dinner. However, Arthur declines, stating his discomfort with the company present. Krill dismisses the guards, and as night approaches, Arthur is led by the corrupt guards to the jail's luxury suite. Krill welcomes him, then declares his intention to rule Africa once he's released from jail. Without wasting any time, Arthur puts his target in a chokehold and uses a towel to render him unconscious. He quickly concocts a poison and forces the man to ingest it. When his guards enter to check on the situation, Arthur tells them that he's meditating, but they figure out what's going on. Arthur moves to the back wall and eats the device, applies shark repellent on himself, and the wall behind him explodes. As he dives off the side of the island into the water, the guards open fire on him. Crane's crew locates Arthur and retrieves him onto the vessel. Arthur requests an immediate call with Gina, which Crane facilitates. Arthur inquires about her well-being, and she informs him that Crane has allotted him 36 hours to eliminate the next target, Adrian Cook. Crane spots Arthur's father's watch on Gina and is glad to discover a vulnerability. In Sydney, Adrian resides on the 58th floor of a skyscraper. He is a tycoon in the mining industry and has an abundance of personnel at his disposal. His walls are essentially impervious to explosives, not to mention the retina scanners and facial recognition systems that are unhackable. Arthur devises a strategy to purchase a lower level of the same building and manages to distract a woman long enough to photograph the key. He starts to scrutinize the floor plans and fabricates a compact homemade bomb concealed with a screw. Dressed in a mechanic's outfit, Arthur makes his way to the floor beneath Adrian and attaches a window. He starts to ascend the high-rise building, taking it one level at a time. In due course, he arrives at the pool and employs a suction tool to suspend himself 58 floors above the ground. He navigates across the pool, positioning himself ideally to start installing installing the self-made explosives. After implanting the bomb, Adrian spots him, but it's already too late. Arthur descends to the floor below just as the pool bursts open, leading to Adrian's fatal plunge. Arthur departs from the scene, and the news of the incident reaches Crane, leaving him in utter disbelief. One of his henchmen readies the camera for another video call with Gina, but she cleverly points it towards the boat in the background. Arthur takes the call, and Gina informs him that the watch has stopped functioning. Arthur scrutinizes the backdrop, and the henchman catches on, striking Gina. Arthur promptly contacts the harbor master's office and succeeds in obtaining the coordinates of the ship. He hops onto a helicopter, only to find the ship gone, and so he flies across the harbor in search of the boat. He then opts to leap from the helicopter into the water. With stealth, he boards the boat and starts eliminating the goons. He neutralizes another as he gets closer to Gina. He descends to the lower deck and engages in combat with a few more adversaries. Arthur catches sight of Gina, but is suddenly under fire from all directions. He performs a series of daring maneuvers to eliminate his attackers, but is eventually apprehended and brought before Crane. Crane orders him to eliminate a third target, and as Crane departs, Arthur resumes his offensive, dispatching more henchmen before diving into the water and retrieving a concealed breathing apparatus to make his escape. In Bulgaria, Arthur navigates the streets with a plan to assassinate his third target, Max Adams, an American arms trafficker. Max has fortified his stronghold with an impenetrable defense system and houses top-tier submarines within the compound. Arthur conducts some research and learns that Crane has gained control over a significant portion of the global arms market following the deaths of Krill and Adrian. Crane's aim is to obliterate all competition. Arthur promptly heads to a hospital and ascends to the rooftop with his sniper rifle. He intentionally shoots a man in the leg, prompting the hospital to dispatch a helicopter. Arthur stows away on the helicopter, and upon landing, he stealthily disembarks. Within the compound, he incapacitates all the security cameras and starts neutralizing the guards. He proceeds to the control room and incapacitates the personnel there. Upon reaching the ventilation system, he spots an elevator en route to the panic room and detonates it. Despite this, Max manages to reach his panic room. He uses his eye scan to gain access. However, Arthur is already inside waiting for him. Arthur expresses his desire to just talk, and Max is already aware that Crane is after the three of them. Arthur offers Max a deal to ensure his survival, to which Max readily agrees. They walk out while they keep having a conversation about their business. Arthur proceeds to strategize, intending to utilize both the submarines and Max's supposed demise as a lure. Max is thrilled with the plan and promptly fakes his own death. Arthur supplies him with an underwater breathing apparatus, and Crane is informed via news that Max has passed away. However, Max is very much alive. Arthur then contacts Crane, who consents to release Gina once his men confirm Max's death and seize the submarines. Arthur returns to the base and starts preparing deadly traps. Aware that the men are on their way, he intends to eliminate them all. Eventually, the soldiers reach the location and fan out. Arthur's trap significantly reduces the number of enemies. He employs more traps, using grenades, rifles, and anything else he can find. He continues his onslaught, launching a grenade at the troops, much to Crane's displeasure. Arthur swiftly boards his underwater vehicle and sets course for Crane. However, Crane captures Gina and uses her as a lure. He then monitors all cameras to track Arthur's location. Arthur emerges from the water, discarding his old principle of not seeking revenge. He hurls one of the blades at the camera, putting Crane in a precarious situation. Arthur continues, advancing towards Gina by eliminating all nearby men. Gina attempts to flee but is shot in the abdomen. Crane takes Gina hostage while Arthur is occupied elsewhere. He then uses one as a human shield to eliminate all men in the vicinity. The battle continues, with a grenade being used to dispatch one of the henchmen. Crane triggers the boat's self-destruct mechanism. With time running out, Arthur locates Gina in the control room. He finds the bomb, places Gina in an escape pod, and releases it. Crane wants him dead, but Arthur's combat acuity is too superior for them to stand a chance. Arthur and Crane exchange gunfire, and when they run out of bullets, they resort to hand-to-hand combat. Arthur easily wins, and Crane claims it's all because Arthur deserted him in their childhood. The fight continues, and Arthur takes a heavy blow. Crane lashes out at him with a chain until Arthur catches it and uses it to bind him to the boat, and the boat explodes. Gina witnesses the debris from the explosion and breaks down in tears. A rescue vessel arrives, and emergency responders are promptly summoned to the location where Max observes Gina being escorted away. She is informed that there were no survivors, and Max conveys to his men that even legends meet their end. After some time, Gina goes back to her children's center in Cambodia. She pens a letter to May, expressing her gratitude for everything she has done. Yet, she remains distressed over Arthur's demise. The movie ends with Gina around her kids, but when she looks out, she can't believe her eyes. Arthur is alive and standing next to her. In the final scene, Max checks the security footage on the boat and realizes that Arthur used a secret compartment on the boat to cheat death once again. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching.